Hello and welcome to Warcraft Daily for today, the 4th of January 2013. So in today's news, we only really have two things, and I might end up just taking one or two questions at the end. First up, we have a whole bunch of stuff from Chris Robertson's Twitter, including the announcement of a future announcement, which should be quite exciting. And then just some talk about the item squish from Celestian, and basically just how they're going to be handling the exponential increase of item levels at basically higher levels. So first of all, Chris Robertson. This guy is the main, well, I think he's the kind of like main lead art guy, at least for World of Warcraft, and he certainly seems to be in charge of the teams who are working day to day on the game. And first of all, the big news, he announced an announcement. They are going to be unveiling a new model for Warlords. He did say that it would be as soon as possible, and it will be on the Warlords of Draenor website. Now, there is actually a bit of an issue with that. The Warlords of Draenor website doesn't have a full 3D model viewer like, say, WoW or something like that does, so we may not end up getting the best, like, in terms of what we see, but at least it should give us a good idea. Now, the big question is, what are they going to announce? Well, currently, they have got quite a few classes already done, and we've seen the Undead, we've seen Gnomes, Dwarves, and then finally Orcs. So of the remaining classes, they're probably, like, they want to start this new year off with a big old kick in the arse of hype, so I'm thinking humans. And Blood Elves, basically, Blood Elves are the most popular Horde race, humans are the most popular Alliance race, so it definitely makes sense to me that I'd say humans will be the ones that we see. The reason that I don't think it will be Blood Elves is because they, first of all, they're not seen in as many NPCs. Like humans, if you're an Alliance player, you see humans all the time, just like if you're a Horde player, you see Orc NPCs all the time. So they really want to be unveiling the things that affect the most people, and I think humans is probably the next up one from Orcs. It's definitely going to be interesting, though, because the current humans in World of Warcraft, well, okay, my main problems with the human males, I actually think the human female models are pretty good. They kind of look reasonable, whereas the males, what? Have you ever seen a guy that looks like that? No. Like, everything is the wrong shape. Their heads are just really dumb looking. They've got this crazy looking jawline thing, and their feet and their hands look just silly and terrible. So yeah, overall the human model is just damn old, and I suppose that does make sense. It's an old 2000 and, well, hell, it's not even a 2004 model. It was probably 2003 or 2 model when you think about when the game was actually being developed. So yeah, I'd say humans are definitely the best bet. I just can't wait to see whatever the hell it is, and basically within like half an hour of them doing the announcement, you'll probably see a video on this channel, or at least the video will be rendering. I plan on jumping right on top of whatever the hell this is. Still, it's good news, and it's definitely nice to start the year off with a bit of hype. I think that there's been a bit of an issue with Warlords where, like, hype was ultra strong at the start, then it kind of tailed off during Christmas, and now that Elder Scrolls and Wildstar may come out before Warlords, people are starting to kind of get a little bit, I don't really know what the right word is, but kind of hype is draining, so they need something really good to get it back into people's heads, just from a purely business standpoint. Anyway, next he talked about the Blood Elves, and he said that they may add Norse-Dumu style facial hair in a future customization patch. Not patch, pass. Basically, a lot of the way that a lot of these things work is that they first make the base model and a few base customization options, and then they'll just send the art team and a few passes through the whole thing, adding further customization options. Chris said the Norse-Dumu was actually a really good model, well, a pretty good model, and therefore made a great place to start with adding additional Blood Elf kind of facial hair and options like that. Now, one thing that's probably worth mentioning is that, like, Norse-Dumu definitely looks different to your average Blood Elf, so I'm not really too sure if that kind of body structure would be ported over into a new Blood Elf model, or at least would be an option for it, but I'd say at least maybe some of those more interesting facial hair options will be there, which is fair enough. Next, he was talking about ogres, and a lot of people have thought that, well, we're getting new ogres in Warlords of Draenor, right? Because they're natives of the planet, and honestly, the new ogre models look fantastic. They're a little bit less derpy, they look a lot more brutal, and I think they're a bit larger, and in general, just more polished up and badass looking. Now, lore-wise, they actually can't be ported over, and Chris said this, and basically, he said the ogres in Draenor don't fit, because lore-wise, the ones in Azeroth are a bit more devolved than their Draenor counterparts. And I think that's definitely fair enough. These new Draenor ogres are going for a more brutal look, whereas I think the kind of more cartoony, derpy style of the Azeroth ones actually serves the game quite well, and it gives a decent bit of charm, so I think they should try to keep that. And if that means that we don't see new ogres for another year or two, then I think that's really okay. Still though, in this, World of Warcraft's one of those games which is going to start to suffer from a serious disparity in the quality of visuals from expansion to expansion. Now, really, it was Cataclysm that they started stepping up more on the high end, graphics-wise, and they've sort of continued that with Mist. But if you actually compare, way old world to the current stuff, a lot of it does look kind of horrible, and it's a bit of a pity, really, because it's going to make the game a little bit harder to get into. That is, of course, if you can't just buy a million level 90s, because, hey, that's the topical thing to say at the minute. So, yeah, I don't know, it would be nice to have ogres fixed up in Azeroth. Next, he said that NPCs will be updated with player models, and perhaps most interestingly, he said that he would like to update some of the mounts eventually. So first of all, NPCs, just to talk about them, they currently are basically sharing a lot of the same models as players apart from the special NPCs, so I'm not really sure what they're going to do with special character NPCs that have their own model. I really think that Jaina and Varian Rin need an update though. I know that they were both recently updated, but come on, you've seen that 5.4N cinematic, and compare them to Garrosh, even to Taran Zu, and hell, even Vol Jin, actually, he seemed to look a bit better. They just look crap, so I think those characters definitely need to be updated. And as for actual NPCs themselves, it turns out that it's going to be a toggle. So even if you just prefer the style of the old models, you will be able to toggle back into the old models with the old animations and that whole system. So there's definitely a lot of customization there, and I think it is great that the NPCs are being updated too, because honestly it would just look a tad ridiculous if they weren't. As for updating mounts, there's a lot of work in that, actually. It really is a great deal of work. So I think it would probably just be the original racial mounts, maybe some of the special vanilla ones, at least for now. I think everything else really fits well enough, so yeah, that's what I think. Next, he said that they played around with letting druid forms wear different kinds of armor, but it ended up looking bad. Yeah, I agree. I mean, can you imagine just a cat running around in a suit of armor? Okay, running around, not an anamorphic one, just a regular four-legged cat. No, that just wouldn't work. And yeah, I can just imagine it looking absolutely ridiculous. I suppose I understand, though, that people who do play a druid are sometimes a little bit miffed that they get all this cool armor and their cool set pieces, and they never actually get to see it. So that's a bit of a problem. Maybe they can have some way of, maybe a little bit more customization. Maybe you can go into, a groomer and get your druid forms groomed or something. Yeah, let's do that, but something to give them a little bit more customization or something like that for their forms I think would be really nice, because adding that personal touch to the character that you fight in is definitely important. I guess an ultra-exaggerated version of this would be saying that it's like a Worgen who can only see their armor in human mode, which would be a bit silly. Still, not Hugans. Hugans don't exist. Worgens are definitely a lot more humanoid looking than a damn cat or a bear. And then finally, for the things from Chris Robertson, he said that they want to do more class-specific animations, and the person who asked him this question mentioned specifically the jewel throw for Stormbolts and that sort of thing, and Chris said that the animators were fired up, ready to go, and that things like that were on the wish list. I think this is great, actually, and class flavor is very, very important in a game like this, because it really does kind of hammer down how much, the individual kind of feel of your class. It makes people more attached to it. I know that when I'm playing a monk, you get used to those animations, they feel really monkish. And then when you move on to some of the older classes, maybe, let's just say a rogue or a hunter or something, yeah, we have shooting animations and stabbing animations, but really I don't think they're, in terms of flavor, aesthetically strong as some of the newer classes. So yeah, definitely. I also think that as a hunter, our animations look really messy because we're firing off more arrows that you can really shoot at once, which is a little bit strange. So I don't really know how they'd ever fix something like that, but if they could find some cool way, then I'd be all for it. Still, my main beef with being a hunter is I don't have a goddamn quiver. I'm pulling arrows out of absolutely nothing, and it's just silly. Anyway, now that that's done, there is one tweet from Celestian, and I know we have been talking about the item squish quite a bit, but this is a little bit different. In terms of the stats, they expect to have a linear increase up to level 85, at least that's their current number, and then they're going to allow things to get a little bit more exponential at the higher levels, because they feel it's just a lot more rewarding, and it's a more tangible increase in power. This is absolutely true. And one of the things that they seem to be quite happy about is the power deltas between patches in Mists. I've been saying Warlords of Draenor that much, I don't even know what damn expansion I'm talking about. So yeah, in Mists, at least for PvE players, when you move from tier to tier, there was a very, very sizable increase in power, and it actually felt really good. It meant that when you got into that new tier and you got a new piece of gear, it felt like a real upgrade, and that was nice. So I'm all for things being a bit more exponential towards the end. Of course, the problem is that old WoW was linear from 1 to 60, and then exponential from 60 to 70, 70 to 80, 80 to 85, and 85 to 90. That's a lot of expansions, and with each expansion kind of ramping it up and bettering the previous one in terms of numbers, that just made things ridiculous. So now they're going to be cutting that down so it only gets exponential after Cataclysm. And also, I don't think that things will be as exponential as they were previously. So I think that, say, the crazy numbers that we saw, even if you took like the percentage of DPS that we were doing at the end of Mists in comparison to the start, which I'd say we're probably about 400% more DPS than we were at the start. Like, if you think at the start of Mists, there's people who were doing really well, and they would, say, get 60, 70,000 DPS. Now, if you move that into 5.4, there's people doing 300,000 DPS. That is a massive increase. I don't think things like that will be happening. It would just make the numbers be far too out of hand, and they'd be needing an item squish every 2 expansions. They have already said, though, that they want a squish every 4 expansions, roughly. It's interesting when they're talking about, oh yeah, in 4 expansions time, when we've only had 4 expansions to the game. They are definitely in this one for the long haul. Long haul? What? No, long haul. Anyway, they said, well, Celestian said, as an example, that you really feel the change from 100 to 120. That's a 20% increase. But you don't really feel the change that much from 500 to 520, because that's only a 4% increase in your previous power level. So basically, yeah, it's just, this is kind of game design talk. It's funny with this game design sort of stuff. I think I'd recommend that a lot of you go and watch this YouTube series. It's called Extra Credits. It's a fantastic thing. It's by, I think, James Portnoy and some Penny Arcade related people. But basically, he's a game designer. I think he's freelance, I'm not specifically sure. But every week there's it's a pretty short, snappy, informative little lecture thing that's a good bit of fun on game design theory and that sort of thing. And I think as someone who plays games, having an appreciation for game design theory will probably actually just be to your benefit. It'll help you appreciate a lot more things and then understand more of the developer's perspective. And if you are looking to ever give feedback to Blizzard, and if you are a bit more informed about game design, then maybe you can make better feedback. That said, that shit's all Blizzard's job, so obviously it's only really the sort of thing you should do if you are particularly passionate about the subject. Anyway, that is it for today's Warcraft Daily. I know we got a little bit more rambly there towards the end, but hell, what can you do? We are still only off the new year. Blizzard are wiping away their hangovers, and hopefully we will soon get some more solid information about Warlords. I just can't wait until we're going to start finding out more and more and more about garrisons and all these cool things, and then get into that damn beta where I will probably take a fortnight off university and murder myself doing videos, which would be great fun. Anyway, thank you very much for watching this episode, hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.